I'm about to get in trouble for uploading this video, and probably blacklisted from multiple companies from ever working with them ever again for what I'm about to say. And I'm one not to really sugarcoat my words. I'm going to say what needs to be said, and I am someone that is the voice of the community. I am someone that likes to advocate for those that, are in the community, that are actual fans of anime, manga, games, etc. I like to speak for the individual. And in this case, what's going on here is, pretty crazy stuff. So, you take one good look at this post right here from VIZ Media, and you can instantly see what's wrong. When you see less likes than quote retweets and comments, and it has 5 million views on top of that, you know something really bad happened. Now, this is VIZ Media, the official manga licensing company for the West. They have their own service that actually I personally am subscribed to, just going to keep it completely transparent, and I have worked with them in the past, and as you can see, they also follow me right here, and I do like their service. But this right here does need to be called out, and I'm just going to straight up say it. And this is where I get into the point of how I'm going to get blacklisted. Because obviously, when you're someone that talks about a company that you work with in a negative light, or you try to go against what they say, they most likely never want to work with you again. And if that happens, I guess that happens. But let's just get straight into this and talk about it. So VIZ Media released this little clip here, or they posted this video clip from YouTube that more or less tries to say piracy is bad, don't do piracy, yada 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 stuff. But the thing is, it sounds very hollow and virtue signaling and not really something that goes with the community for anime and manga. And the reason for that is because VIZ Media as a platform, since they technically do have a stranglehold on the manga market, at least when it comes to looking at manga online legally, there's a lot of countries and a lot of different places around the world that cannot access VIZ Media's service. For instance, let's say you live in a random country in like South America, maybe there's parts in Europe, maybe there's places, just in Asia to some degree. There could be areas and countries within the world to where you cannot use VIZ Media's service to be able to access and read manga legit and legally because they don't offer it in your region. And this video they posted more or less as a slap in the face saying, oh, even if it's not, in your region, even if you're not legally, able to read this series, you shouldn't read manga to begin with. It feels very messed up, and it feels like I said a slap to the face for those that really do love anime and manga, and there's a lot of people that are legitimately mad. I mean, you take one quick scroll down, you just see a lot of people advocating and saying what's wrong with this entire situation, how they have reprints that are not on there anymore, how sales are done, how it's a service problem. You can just see there is legitimately a lot of people angry. I can keep scrolling for a while, but let's get into the heart of the issue and what this actually is. VIZ Media, as I've already said at the beginning of the video, I do like what they have done. They're not perfect. But the problem here is that they have a lot of stuff in their catalog, which Packer Girl here even, mentions. Actually, I'm going to just pull this up. They have botched localizations, censored manga releases, barely any new license/reprints, stops localizing series like Gintama before completion, no quality control, shit anime home releases, shit marketing, shit manga reader. So, more or less, I do agree with some of these points. I do feel like reading manga on VIZ Media's site could be a lot better. The way the format of it is just, it's not good. I'm just gonna be honest. It crashes, it's glitchy. I've had a lot of issues with it in the past. But I really want to get into the main heart of the issue, what people are actually upset with, which is like botched translation, censored manga, no reprints and stuff. And I think this one's a pretty big deal. So there's a lot of manga that, let's say, VIZ Media gets, that's a part of their catalog, and they print it out for people to be able to purchase. And let's say, the reprints, they no longer reprint the series anymore. So it eventually falls out of favor. They're not making new volume copies of it. And as years go on by, let's say volume 1 of One Piece, I know One Piece you can easily get, but I'm just using hypothetical. Volume 1 of One Piece you can no longer get in a way from a legitimate site like VIZ Media anymore because they no longer offer it. They're completely out of stock. And so the only way to be able to get a certain manga volume is by, spending like outrageous prices from a scalper that's potentially upcharging the volume that usually would be worth $8 or $9, maybe to $100 or $150. The point of the matter is that letting things go out of stock and not having reprints allows scalpers to come in and cause a lot of damage, which is kind of what happens with Pokemon cards and stuff like that. There's obviously some differences there, but we all know the damage that scalpers can do to a market, especially when there is scarcity to a certain product. And in this case, when you have these series, like these different stories that, you know, are out of print and you can no longer legally obtain from legitimate sources, obviously people want to read those stories, they're going to go other ways to read them, which aka means piracy. And so that is one big reason why a lot of people have had an issue with VIZ's statement that there is a lot of things that are completely out of print, you can no longer get them anymore, and the only way to get them is through outrageous prices or through piracy. And that is definitely a big, like, negative to what VIZ Media had to say here, because of course people are going to pirate if they can't legally obtain something. That doesn't even get into, like, the different region issue, which I already briefly discussed at the beginning of the video, where, like, if you're in a different country that VIZ is not operating in, then you can't even read these manga to begin with. Like, if you wanted to read these manga in your native language or whatever, you're out of luck. You're not allowed to do that. That's basically what VIZ said here, that you're not allowed to actually read manga. That's kind of disrespectful, especially when you think about the roots of anime and manga in the West. And look, I'm just going to rip the band-aid right off. I'm just going to say it like it is. Anime and manga is steeped in piracy. It is. Like, as much as people don't want to, like, acknowledge that fact, there's a lot of companies and different people that are trying to black hole this or act like that's not the case, but a lot of series and a lot of anime and manga culture in general outside of Japan is saturated in piracy. Now, obviously, majority of this, I guess, will be people that just don't want to pay, which, you know, I'm not going to get into that moral dilemma. It's not my place. But obviously, the reason why a lot of piracy does happen is because there is a service issue, because people can't legally obtain these certain series. And that's how a lot of people within the West became aware of anime and manga, was because they found this random series by a random name on a random site on the internet back in the past, and they started watching it, and they had to wait for fan translations just to be able to watch a series or read a manga. Hell, there is still manga to this very day that are not licensed by companies like VIZ or anything, and the only way you can actually read them outside of Japan is waiting for a fan translation group to come in and actually translate it. And the translations could be spotty. For instance, like, maybe they release chapter 1, and then you have to wait 2 months for another chapter to be translated, and then suddenly the next day chapter 3 and 4 is translated, and then you'll have another fan translation group come in, and they'll translate chapter 50, even though there's a big gap between all the other chapters. It's just, this type of stuff happens with fan translations. It's a wild, wild west, and, you know, the concept of anime and manga has been built on piracy for a very long time, for decades upon decades, and trying to act like that is not the reason why anime even managed to gain momentum is kind of foolish, in my personal opinion. Now, I will say, and I've always said this anytime I make a video about piracy for anime and manga, I do think that it's well within the rights of a company to copyright take down and stuff like that. There's stuff wrong with them protecting their IPs, that's fine. But the problem here is, it's not just about protecting IPs, it's literally blocking people off from even reading these certain series and experiencing them because you have things out of stock, out of print, you don't offer them for some arbitrary reason, you either drop the licensing for it, or don't continue to translate it for other arbitrary reasons. It's a bad situation. And then so going after people and, you know, trying to slap them in the face saying, oh, you can't read this series in the country, too bad, it's not a good look. It's not. And obviously the reactions here, I mean, like, looking at the quote retweets and what people are legitimately saying is pretty bad. I mean, VIZ Media is pretty much doing the exact same thing that Crunchyroll has been doing. Not to the same extreme extent, but it is still pretty bad. I mean, you could see a lot of different examples here of people just calling this type of stuff out and all that, and, yeah, it's not good. It's really not. So, yeah, VIZ Media really did not read the room, especially when, in the last few weeks, there's been this heavy push with, like, a lot of different manga sites getting completely removed from the internet, with China and Japan teaming up to take down Bato. I think that this was definitely, the reason why this was released was probably in response to what happened, but it definitely wasn't the right response to do, especially since there is a bigger reason why piracy exists to begin with. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts on this situation. I know that there's a lot more I can list off with reasons why VIZ is wrong here, but more or less, I'm probably going to get blacklisted for this. VIZ probably won't want to work with me ever again because, you know, of what I'm having to say here. But it needs to be said. I feel like it's very important to kind of outline why this happens and why people are upset and why people expect better. Because I do like VIZ. I like their service. They're not perfect. I want them to be better. I do. I want them to be able to offer to everyone around. I mean, hell, I'm just going to be honest with you. Once again, this is not a sponsored video or anything. I'm just saying from my personal experience. You know, $2.99 a month to read, like, a lot of different series on their site is a steal. It's great. But obviously there's a lot of things on their site that they don't offer as well, and there is, just going to be straight up, censored stuff on their site. There is. They censor stuff. And you can't sometimes read the certain content on the app if you want to read it on your phone. You have to go to their site. Like, there was issues with Chainsaw Man, for instance. You couldn't read certain chapters of Chainsaw Man because of how graphic they are. And so you had to go to the actual desktop version just to be able to read it. There's a lot of little things like this that are just, you know, friction with them. And yeah, I want them as a service to improve, because I don't want to see Crunchyroll consume them, because you can see it happening. But yeah, I'll leave it at that, though. Thank you so much. Leave a like on this video. I would definitely appreciate that if you do, because I'm probably also going to get a lot of dislikes for this one as well, because I keep landing on landmines this week, but it's got to be said. Anyways, be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.